Father, you are worthy of such praise that no doubt you just heard, and so much more. So much more. And we are people blessed to receive your word revealed to us in written form. And so, Lord, I pray as we open this book and see the truth written here, keep it from being just words on a page and just a man speaking and just people hearing, Lord. Make it a reality that hits our hearts, and changes our lives, and pushes us toward Christ-likeness. Would you do that, Lord, for your glory? In Jesus' name, amen. Well, please turn in your copy of God's holy and perfect word to the Gospel of John, chapter 11 and verse 17. If you do not have a Bible, you will find one in the seat in front of you, and we'll be on page 897 in that Bible. If you don't own a Bible today, we want to invite you to take that Bible home and keep it, to read it, to cherish it, to find life in the words presented on the page. John chapter 11, verse 17. When someone dies, it's traditional to have a time of receiving of friends. A time for people to come and speak words of kindness to the grieving family. Well, on this morning, which, by the way, is a beautiful Easter morning, through this narrative in John, I want to take you to a receiving of friends of sorts. But this one, I suspect, will be unlike any other receiving of friends you've ever been to. Look with me in John chapter 11, beginning in verse 17. If you're newer to the Bible, the big number on the page is the chapter 11. The smaller numbers on the page are what verse I'm starting in, so chapter 11, verse 17. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die." Do you believe this? She said to him, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who's coming into the world." Verse 28. When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying?" Verse 38. Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he's been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always heard me, or you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. I'm calling this a receiving of friends text, because where we pick up is right in the middle of a family grieving over the death of a beloved brother. The brother's name was Lazarus. He had 2 sisters, Mary and Martha. Maybe the most mentionable thing for this family is the fact that they are close to the ever-growing in popularity Jesus. So as many from the community gather around the 2 sisters, Jesus is on his way to this receiving of friends too. Now notice verse 17. Keep your Bibles open throughout the sermon. I'm going to refer to the text. I have nothing good to say unless it comes from the Scriptures. So notice verse 17. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. In other words, someone has already brought over the vegetable platter for the family, so to speak. The cars are all parked in the yard. The letters and the flowers and the cards, they've all been delivered. Everyone is just sitting around, sharing stories, simply being together. You know what a receiving of friends is like, and then the time after with your family. And now here comes Jesus, and Martha, one of the sisters, hears that he's coming. Verse 20. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary, her sister, remained seated in the house. Now, just to catch you up, a few days ago prior to this, when their brother Lazarus was still sick, the sisters had sent word for Jesus requesting that he would come and help them, especially their brother. But he didn't make it in time. Clearly, he's just now about to arrive. Lazarus is already dead. And as strange as it sounds, if you look back in the text right before this one, verse 15 says from Jesus that he intentionally didn't make it in time. He was purposefully late. Jesus even said, I'm glad I wasn't there in time. So now that he is almost there and Martha hears that he's in the distance, she doesn't wait for him, but instead goes out to meet him. Now, what's about to happen in this narrative could be described, could be summarized like this. As these 2 sisters grieve over death, Jesus is going to show up and teach on life. As these 2 sisters grieve over death, Jesus shows up and teaches about life. Which means we all will learn something critical today, foundational today, about life. And there's no better time to teach on the most important things of life than when death grabs your attention. The writer of Ecclesiastes 7:2 puts it this way, quote, it's better to go to a house of mourning than to a house of feasting. Why? For this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Better to go to a house of mourning than to a house of feasting. Mourning over death, because this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Brothers and sisters, friends, if you're here today as I'm teaching about life from the words of Jesus, let me exhort you to lay it to heart. For this is the end of all mankind. Where else can you go to learn about life? You can go to all sorts of places to learn about things in life, things that you will work for in life, colleges and universities and training centers to teach you all about the things in life. Where else can you go to learn about life as a foundation? Jesus is going to teach us this morning. I don't know why you came this morning. Hopefully with the motivation for worship. But maybe some of you might have come out of obligation, maybe out of tradition, maybe out of some sense of guilt, maybe because it's Easter and that's what our culture does, right? I also don't know what phase of life each of you are in today. I don't know your outlook on life at the moment, whether you're encouraged or whether you're discouraged, whether you're hopeful or depressed. I don't know your successes or failures at the present time, but what I do know this, at some point in your life, you'll be where these sisters find themselves, thinking deeply about the things of life, asking life's most important questions, wondering, what's next? Why this? Why God? Is there a God? And when Jesus shows up at this receiving of friends, as everyone is thinking about death, he's going to teach about life. So I just want to encourage you as strong as I can, lean into the words and actions of Jesus in this text. I am not overstating at all when I say all of your lives and all of my life depends on what you do with the words of Jesus in this text. What does Jesus have to teach today about your life? He's going to teach three things in particular. Do you notice in this narrative how everyone is around the sisters consoling them? But when Jesus shows up, they move into action. First Martha, then Mary eventually. Why? Well, we saw in the text right before this one, I preached this on Friday night at the Good Friday service, in verse 3, that the sisters sent for help from Jesus when Lazarus became sick. Clearly, they thought that Jesus could provide some sort of help in a way that no one else could. These sisters know of Jesus' power. They don't know the full extent of it yet, but they know of some of his power. They've seen the miraculous signs that he's already done in the past. And so in their thinking, they are thinking on the fact that if you would have come in time, Jesus, you could have helped. Yes, the rest of the family, they can pray for us, and they can grieve with us, and they can eat with us. But Jesus, you could have done something for us. Verse 22 shows that Martha is still hopeful that something is going to happen. She says, but even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. She's grieving. I wish you would have been here, Jesus. Is there anything you can do now? And Jesus says in verse 23, your brother will rise again. Your brother will rise again. Now that sort of feels, just from first glance, like the type of pleasantries that you might say going through the line of receiving of friends. You all know what I'm talking about. There's the grieving family. They're standing in line, heartbroken over loss. Tears are flowing because of great pain over a loved one dying, some more than others in the family. There's various personalities in the family. You know some of the people in the family. You have no idea who some of the other ones are. The people in line are standing at the lowest point of many of their lives, and now it's your turn to step up and say something. And you think, maybe not right out, but in the back of your mind, maybe you think or feel, I haven't been trained for this. Especially if it's a tragedy. I didn't prepare for this, but there you are, and the line is moved, and it's your turn. What are you going to say? What do you say to someone who says they're heartbroken over their brother dying? Turns out many people don't know what to say. In fact, if you Google search receiving of friends, one of the most popular questions people search is this: what do I say in line at receiving of friends? Do you hug? You handshake? Handshake the men, hug the women? You smile and kind of nod, or don't smile and only nod? What do you say to someone? You say, I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm going to be praying for you. Please let me know if you need anything. You know, he was a good man. He's in a better place. Your brother will rise again. Now, none of those statements are bad. In fact, they are good if you say them genuinely. And I want to encourage you, if you're in that situation, as you know the person, say it genuinely. Maybe you're holding their hands. Maybe you're hug their neck. I don't want to put down any of these sayings. I'll be praying for you. I'm so sorry for your loss. But when Jesus meets Martha, listens to her, and then says, your brother will rise again, it kind of feels like a pleasant thing to say in line at the funeral home, but in the moment, the best of words don't help. Like, I'm sorry too. And thank you for your prayers, but I'm lonely at 2 a.m. when nobody else is there. And yes, he's in a better place, but I want to be there with him, Jesus. And of course he'll rise again. Verse 24, look what she says. I know that he will rise again on the resurrection of the last day, but it's not the last day. It's now. And it hurts. And if you would have been here, Jesus, you could have saved him. Why'd you show up late? And as everyone else would give their pleasantry and keep going, in essence, Jesus says, no, you don't understand. Verse 25, I'm the resurrection and the life. Your brother will rise again on the resurrection of the day. I know he's going to rise again, Jesus. No. I'm the resurrection and the life. He's going to rise again. And in his mind, he's thinking, today. He's going to rise again today, Martha. He doesn't tell her yet. In one sentence, Jesus addresses humanity's twofold desires. What does everyone want in the world? We want to live, and we want to avoid death. And in one phrase, one sentence, Jesus says, in him, you get both. It's here we see the first lesson that Jesus teaches about life. Number one, Jesus offers the promise you need for life. Now, you might be thinking, hey, I don't need very much in my life. We overuse that word sometimes about what we need. But let me tell you, right here, Jesus offers the promise you absolutely need for life. Now, most people don't feel the urgency of death until it hits near them. And you think about your own life. You clock in, you clock out. Weekends come, weekends go. It's a new year, it's a new age. It's a new month, it's a new day. Life just keeps marching on, and we, in our everyday life of circumstance, we just get in line of the parade, and we just keep marching with it over and over without realizing fully that the parade comes to an end for all of us, and for some of us, it sneaks up on us. Most don't feel the urgency of Jesus' promise here. Like when I say Jesus offers the promise you need for life, maybe for some of you it just feels like religious preacher talk. and life is so full and life is so busy. I know I need Jesus. But friend, just as God gave you a birthday, God has appointed for you a death day. And who's ready to celebrate? Why don't we sing Happy Death Day to you when someone dies? Because it's so much more sobering than the birthday. And yet, just as real. Friends, I would encourage you, don't treat casually the words of Jesus here when he offers the promise you need for life. And what does he promise? Verse 25, I'm the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. That is an extraordinary promise. One that easily just passes us by. Friends, this is not complicated. If you want to avoid ultimate death, Jesus says, believe in him. Now, on a day like Easter Sunday, when a pastor or preacher says, believe in Jesus, I have no doubt that across this room, minds are going in all sorts of different directions about what I mean, what he means by believe in Jesus. This is not complicated. But believe in Jesus in recent American history has been complicated because it's been reduced to simply acknowledge Jesus. And oh, how many people believe the promise is, you want eternal life? Acknowledge me. And oh, how easy that reducing fits into our nice, polite, American, comfortable life. You believe in Jesus? Yeah, it's what I was raised in all my life. You believe in Jesus? Yeah, Grandma's a member at First Baptist Church. You believe in Jesus? Yeah, I can tell you the day I walked the aisle. How's it changed your life? Well, you see, basically it's like Friday night football and late day Saturdays and lunch at Wade's on Sunday. It's just part of life. It's just who I am. It's what I do. It's what I've always done. We just roll with it, right? What are you talking about? Of course I believe. Doesn't everyone? I know how many people believe the promise from Jesus here. You want eternal life. Just acknowledge me. Just acknowledge. Acknowledge that I was there. Acknowledge that I existed. Acknowledge that I died. Acknowledge, acknowledge, acknowledge. But friends, if you want the life that Jesus promises in the Bible, when he says believe in him, belief is trusting in him to make you right with God. Even though our lives are full of sin, how are we going to stand before a holy God and be okay? Jesus says, trust in me, I'll take care of it. Believe means to be satisfied in Jesus, to be your treasure. Have you ever thought of Jesus as a treasure? That's what belief in the Bible is. Believe in the Bible is to love him as your Savior, meaning without him, I am dead meat. Belief in the Bible is to follow him as your Lord. Believe in the Bible and Jesus is coming to him to be your all. Above everything else, through everything else, under everything else. It's not an acknowledgement of him. It's not just a knowledge of him. It is a complete dependence on him to make you right with God. And Jesus says, for those who believe like that, they'll never die. Maybe you would say in this moment right now, I've never thought of belief like that, but I want to. I want my life to stop being dependent upon my smarts and my ability and my work and my earning it. I want my life just to depend on Him. Lord, would you have me? Won't you cry out like that to Him? If God gives you 80 years in this life, it's just a mist. It's just a breath compared to the next life to come, which will never end. And here's the problem for a massive amount of people today. Most people think of the death in this life too much and the death in the life to come way too little. But what we see here is no one has to go into eternity unsure about what's to come, because Jesus offers a promise you need for life right now. Right now. What is it? March 31st, 2024. He's laid on a platter for you. Eternal life offering promise. Right now. I'm the resurrection and the life. He says, whoever believes in me, though he die, yet he will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. And you see in verse 26, he turns to her and says, do you believe this? A question that turns to all of us this morning. Do you believe this? Do you believe him? Martha responds in verse 27, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who's coming into the world. The text continues in verse 28. And it's here that we see the second lesson Jesus has for you concerning life today. First, he offers the promise you need for life. Second, Jesus personally cares for your life. We begin to see this personal care in verse 28. Look there. When she had said this, Martha, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here and he's calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not come yet to the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house consoling her saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing she was going into the tomb to weep there. So now we see it's the second sister. It's her turn to talk to Jesus. And like her sister, when she hears that he is near, she leaves the house and she goes out to meet him. And also like her sister, did you notice she says the exact same thing in verse 32? Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet saying, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. It's the exact sentence that Martha had said. How often must they have looked out the window when Lazarus was sick, wondering, do you see him yet? Is he coming? Where is he? The sisters say the exact same thing here. And because they say the exact same thing, it's hard not to notice how differently they seem to say it. So just think about it. When Jesus shows up, Martha goes out to meet him first. Mary stays more reserved in the house. Martha goes to and immediately starts talking about it, and Mary seems to, at first at least, internalize it more. Compared to Mary, Martha seems a little more non-expressive, whereas Mary is described as the one who is weeping. She hops up quickly and she runs out to Jesus, where Martha stands kind of level and talks to Jesus. Mary falls at his feet and burst with emotion. Both say the same thing, but they don't say it in the same way. For Martha, it's grieving, but reasoned conversation. Jesus, if you had been here, you could have saved him. And for Mary, it's falling at his feet saying, where were you? Where have you been? And how Jesus responds shows us the personal care he has. Brothers and sisters, lean into this section of the text and see Pastor Jesus here. He cares for the sisters in their own way. For Martha, Jesus speaks words of principle. For Mary, Jesus is going to show works of power. Mary falls at his feet, sobbing, and how does Jesus respond? Verse 33. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in the spirit and greatly troubled. Now that description there of Jesus being deeply moved, it's actually hard to capture in the English language what exactly he was feeling. That original word, your Bible probably has a note on it. That original word translated deeply moved is only used 3 other times outside of this gospel. And each time, maybe a surprise comes to you, it involves the idea of sternly warning someone or sternly charging someone. So it's not simply that Jesus was deeply sad with them. He was, but he was more. This word, deeply moved, it comes with this idea of a mixture of intensely stirred emotions. It carries with it a serious urgency for the moment. It carries with it an emotion of sorrow for the pain they feel. It involves a love he feels for Lazarus, as we see in verse 37. But it also includes him being deeply disturbed by those questioning him and his motives. You look at verse 37. People said, could he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? Like, what's up with him? You take all of that, Jesus was deeply moved with a mixture of intensely stirred emotions. Death is messy. Death does this. But friends, see the pastoral heart of Jesus. Because here's the thing. He knows what he's about to do. He knows that he's about to raise Lazarus from the dead. He knows he has all the answers. He's already given some of them to Martha. He knows all the religious things, like, yes, it's for God's glory, and it's for their good. He knows that God works all things together for good. He knows that Lazarus is going to be in a better place. He knows that joy is going to follow suffering. And yet, while having all the theological answers and seeing every fulfillment of his plan, when Mary falls at his feet sobbing, and when he sees the people around him weeping, when he hears the cries for help, he's deeply moved in his heart. And verse 35, Jesus wept. That's it. Knowing all that he knows, he weeps with the people. He loved the people. Just a quick word to fellow pastors in the room, fellow elders in the room, for that matter, fellow Christians in the room. Notice that in sorrow, Jesus is not stoic. He's not theologically stiff. He's not academically stuffy. He sympathizes and he personally cares for the lives of the sisters. He probably holds their hand as they're weeping, and he weeps with them. Friends, I don't know what sort of picture you have in mind when you think of Jesus. The world today would present all sorts of wrong images of Christ. But one aspect to see clearly of him is in the midst of others grieving, in the midst of his people hurting, Jesus personally cares for your life. We sing the great hymn sometimes, what a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. All of them. We think, Jesus, you sure you want to have me with all I have? Can we find a friend so faithful? Who with all our sorrows share? You can't find a friend so faithful. Brothers and sisters, he has plans and purposes for your sorrows, but he will meet you in them and care personally for you. Know this, Jesus. It's not just in the darkest moment of your life. This Jesus shows up again and again and again every day as you turn to him. Jesus offers the promise you need for life. Jesus personally cares for your life. Here's what we see lastly in this text. Number 3, Jesus has the power to raise the dead back to life. This starts in verse 38. This is the last section of our text. It says, "Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and the stone lay against it. And Jesus said, 'Take away the stone.'" Now, I'm not asking you to do this, but I suspect if I said, "Hey, if you've ever heard this story, raise your hand," I suspect most of you would raise your hand. But I want you to work hard in the last little bit of this sermon to feel the drama of going to the cemetery here. The sisters and Jesus and the crowd, they're all headed to the cemetery where Lazarus is buried in a cave. And they all get there, and Jesus says, "Dig up the grave." That's the equivalent of what he says in verse 39. "Take away the stone. Dig up the grave." Now, why do people go to cemeteries? Well, for various reasons, but it helps people emotionally to grieve over their loved one. And so they've all arrived at the cemetery, and Jesus says, "Dig it up." And here comes the response, verse 35. Martha is back on the scene, back with her reasoning. Now, let's just think about this, verse 39. Martha, the sister of the dead man. Now, pause. Why does John describe him like that? You say, well, because he's dead. No, what I mean is this. Do you realize that since this narrative began in John chapter 11, John refers to Lazarus 12 times in this narrative, and in every time he mentions Lazarus, he either calls him by name, Lazarus, or he refers to him as the brother. Every time. Very personal, by name or by kinship, brother. But now in verse 39, he describes him as the dead man. Why? Why so cold of a description? So distant in form. I mean, Lazarus or the brother, it's warm, it's personal. The dead man is borderline insensitive. I'm so sorry for your dead man passing. No. And what he says next only pushes the distastefulness even further. Jesus says, "Take away the stone." Martha, verse 39, Martha, the sister of the dead man. "No way, there's going to be an odor, Lord." Why? Verse 39, "He's been dead for 4 days, Lord." What is John doing here, emphasizing the deadness of Lazarus? He describes for everyone who would ever see this time and see it happen, to everyone who would ever read this narrative. Let's be clear, Lazarus is dead. He says, smelly dead. 4 days dead. Dead. Lazarus is the dead man. John emphasizes the deadness of Lazarus right here in this moment because of what Jesus is going to do next. Verse 40. Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? And man, were they about to. Verse 41, so they took away the stone. You realize Jesus could have done that with a blink of an eye, but it wasn't the power he wanted to display at the moment. Now I want you to try your best to hear and read this like you never have before. Feel the anticipation of the moment. Dig up the grave, and everyone's wondering. I mean, if you're standing there, you don't know what's happening. You're wondering, what is he about to do? Because we've seen this man heal a crippled man. We've seen this man feed 5,000 plus hungry men. We've seen him walk on water beside men. We've seen him heal a blind man. They've never seen him deal with a dead man. What are you going to do, Jesus? They took away the stone. Verse 41, Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you, you've heard me. I knew you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." So they're standing. Jesus is at the grave. He's praying to God. talking about them, thank you for hearing me, because what I'm about to do, they're about to believe that you sent me. And they all must be thinking, what's he about to do? Now, I have no idea how this sounded. John says Jesus did it with a loud cry. But friends, feel the anticipation of the moment. The people are watching. They're peering into this cave. The stone has been moved. Nothing is moving. No one is speaking. And Jesus cries with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" And if you're standing there, if I'm standing there, I'll tell you what I'm thinking. Like, is he? Surely not. I don't know how it sounded, but his loud cry of "Lazarus, come out" must have thundered with authority. I mean, what kind of voice, what kind of power, what kind of authority can wake a dead man? I have a hard time waking up my 8-year-old son. And with the flick of a vocal cord, Jesus says, "Come out, dead man Lazarus." As others have noticed, I love this insight. It's a good thing Jesus specified Lazarus, or else who knows how many people would have come out of the graves. Jesus calls them out, and now they wait. I don't know how long they wait, but they wait. Verse 44. The man who died came out, and I love this. His hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. He's still wrapped up. So kids, if you want an idea for Reformation Day this year, Halloween, what are you going to dress up as? Wrap yourself in toilet paper, put a cloth over your face, walk around, and people say, "Oh, you're a mummy." You say, "No, I'm risen Lazarus." It's a good evangelism strategy. Verse 44, Jesus says, "Unbind him." He's standing there with everything wrapped. "Unbind him and let him go." This is an embodied picture of death, listen, of death losing its grip on the one that Jesus has claimed. Friends, brothers and sisters, Jesus has the power to raise the dead back to life. Now, I'm almost finished, but I will plead with you not to check out yet. Isn't this the theme of Resurrection Day, Easter? Jesus has the power to raise the dead back to life. Christians and preachers are proclaiming this all over the world today. Jesus has the power to raise the dead back to life. It's why Mary and Martha experienced affliction in losing their brother. It's why Lazarus had to go through the pain of dying. It's why Jesus showed up late. It's why Jesus was glad that he wasn't there on time, because in the midst of these two sisters grieving and the crowd that's watching, God was glorified and Jesus was exalted. It's better than healing sickness. Jesus sent Lazarus to touch the depths of death so that he could bring him back to the fullness of life. And listen, for your saved loved ones who have already died, people that you have wept over and grieved over and mourned over and wished that Jesus would have been there in time, for your saved loved ones, one day Jesus will call them by name and they will come out. And they will rise. It's the power of the resurrection. Now, if we stop here, you've heard the theme of Easter, but what will you do with it? Because none of this means anything if a few months later, the power that Jesus showed died with him. It's just a story that you hear around the time the Masters are played every year. Friends, I want the end to be with this point. Not only does Jesus offer the promise you need for life, not only does Jesus personally care for your life, not only does Jesus have the power to raise the dead back to life, listen, friends, Jesus proved it with his own resurrected life. how do you know that Jesus comes through on that promise? This is not just a one-time deal for Lazarus. We know Jesus comes through because he didn't have Lazarus walk a path he wasn't prepared to walk himself. You think about the path of Jesus' life. He perfectly obeyed God, meaning he kept every single commandment of God perfectly, in perfect purity, in word and thought and deed. He perfectly obeyed God. And then Jesus personally died on the cross. But not for his crimes and disobedience, he had none, but for the crimes of sinners like you and me. He perfectly obeyed, he personally died, and then Jesus powerfully rose back to life. And listen, he gives the offer. What you need before God is perfect obedience. Anyone have that here in and of yourself? Jesus has it for you. He has supplied it. And he says, what you have before God is punishable sins. Jesus pays for those. And he gives you this deal. He says, hey, I'll take your record of unrighteousness and be punished. And I'll give you my record of righteousness and let you live. Deal? But you need to let go of your sin and turn away from self and follow me. You should take that gift of life. You say, how do I know Jesus will come through on it? Because he rose again, friends. And when Jesus died, he paid for sins. No more debt to be paid. It's finished. And when he finished it, he overcame death. So here's what I want you to do as we close. Hearing this news, this is kind of scary, but all of you will respond in one way or the other, whether you realize it or not. You'll either love Jesus for this news, you'll hate Jesus for this news, or you just won't care. If you've never trusted in Jesus today, please consider Jesus offers the promise you need for life. Jesus personally cares for your life. Jesus has the power to raise the dead back to life. And he proved it in his own resurrection. Turn away from sin and trust in him. Brothers and sisters in the room, the last word is yours. If you're following Jesus, if you believe that Jesus was raised from the dead, everything changes. There's nothing to fear, nothing in all the world. What's going to happen to you? Worst case scenario, you die. You follow a risen Savior that overcame death and will pick you back up. If you follow a risen Savior, everything changes. Won't you follow him wherever he goes, whatever he says? You can't believe a man rose from the dead and not be changed. Everything changes. He is risen and worthy of our lives. Let's pray. Father, you sent Jesus. He lived perfectly. He died in the place of sinners. He rose again. He's alive indeed. We thank you for this marvelous news of the gospel. We thank you for the gift of life and the power that he displayed in the resurrection. Help us to live as changed lives in light of this glorious news. In Jesus' name, amen.